The stars over the Valkyrie home system burned cold and quiet, but on the bridge of the war cruiser Kelvasa, nothing felt quiet at all. Commander Rael Ventho stood with both hands gripping the edge of the command console, his pale blue eyes fixed on the tactical display. Red dots filled the screen. Too many red dots. Each one was a Drak warship, and each one was closing in on the last free colony of the Valkyrie people. "Report," Rael said, his voice tight. "Enemy fleet, now at 700 vessels," said his second officer, a young Valkyrie named Toma. "Our fleet has 112 ships left, shields at 40% across the line. We cannot hold much longer, Commander." Rael closed his eyes for a moment. He had been fighting the Drak Empire for 11 years. In that time, he had watched 3 worlds fall. He had watched friends die. He had watched the Valkyrie alliance shrink from a proud union of 12 star systems to a desperate huddle of 3. And now, even those 3 were about to be taken. The Drak were not like other enemies. They did not want land. They did not want resources. They wanted domination, pure and simple. Every species they conquered became a slave race, forced to build their war machines, forced to fight their wars. The Valkyrie had seen it happen to the Korrisk, to the Ylanti, to a dozen smaller races whose names were now barely remembered. "Commander, incoming transmission from the Alliance Council," said Toma. Rael nodded. "Put it through." The image of Counselor Vesh appeared on the screen, an old Valkyrie with silver skin and tired eyes. "Rael, the Council has voted. We are ordering a full retreat to the outer colonies. We cannot save Halvex Prime. Counselor, if we retreat now, the Drak will take the planet in less than a day. There are 2 million civilians still on the surface." "We know," Vesh said quietly, "but we have no choice. We do not have the ships." Rael felt something cold settle in his chest. 2 million lives, gone, because the Valkyrie fleet was too small, too weak, too outmatched. "Is there truly nothing else we can do?" Rael asked. "No other race willing to help us? No other fleet?" Vesh was silent for a long moment. Then he said something strange. "There is one old story. Perhaps you have heard it. The story of the vanished race." Rael frowned. "The legend? Counselor, with respect, that is a children's tale." "Perhaps," Vesh said, "but desperate times make old tales worth remembering. Do you know the story, Rael?" Rael did know it. Every Valkyrie child grew up hearing it, told in different ways across 100 worlds, but always the same at its core. Long ago, thousands of years before the Drak Empire rose to power, there had been a race called the humans. They came from a single blue world, small and unremarkable, and yet they had built ships that could tear through the fabric of space itself. They fought wars that shook entire star clusters. They were said to be reckless, stubborn, and impossibly brave, throwing themselves into battles that no sane race would ever enter. Some stories said the humans had wiped out an ancient tyrant race called the Morvek, an enemy even more terrible than the Drak. Other stories said the humans had simply vanished one day, their ships and their homeworld gone without a trace, swallowed by some disaster of their own making. No one had seen a human in over 1,000 years. No expedition had ever found their homeworld. Many scholars believed the entire species was a myth, a story built up over centuries until it became bigger than the truth ever was. Rael had always believed that too. "Counselor, even if the humans were real once, they are gone now. This is not the time for fairy tales. We need real help. Real ships." "I agree," Vesh said, "but an old friend of mine, an archivist on Halvex Prime, found something last week. Deep in an old data vault, sealed since before the Drak War began, a star chart, a single course, marked in a language none of our systems could translate at first. It took our best scholars 3 days to understand it. It points toward a region no one has ever explored, far beyond the edge of known space." "And you think this course leads to the humans?" "I think," Vesh said slowly, "that we have nothing left to lose by trying. Rael, I am giving you a choice, not an order. Take the Kelvasa and 2 escort ships. Follow this course. If it leads nowhere, you will have lost only a few days. But if there is even the smallest chance that this old legend is real..." Rael looked at the tactical display again. The red dots were still closing in. Somewhere below him, On the surface of Halvex Prime, 2 million people were waiting to find out if today was the day they died. "I'll go," Rael said. "But Counselor, someone else must lead the defense here. Commander Yura will take command of the home fleet." "She is ready." Rael nodded, though his heart was heavy. Yura was a fine officer, but she did not have his years of experience against the Drakh. Still, there was no other choice. If this course led to something real, it could be the only thing that saved his people. Within the hour, the Kelvassa and 2 smaller escort ships, the Dovin and the Saral, broke away from the main fleet and turned toward open space. Rael stood on the bridge and watched Halvex Prime shrink behind them on the rear display, a blue and green world surrounded by the flashing lights of battle. He said a silent prayer for the people down there, and then he turned his eyes forward. The course took them far from any known Velkhari territory, past old trade routes, past abandoned outposts, into a region of space that had no name on any star chart. Days passed. The crew grew restless. Toma began to whisper doubts, though never where Rael could hear clearly. Some of the younger crew members joked that they were chasing a ghost story while their homeworld burned. Rael understood their fear. He shared it, but he kept the ship on course. On the 5th day, the sensors picked up something strange. A signal, faint but steady, coming from a system ahead of them. Not a natural signal, not random noise, a pattern. "Commander, I'm reading structured transmissions," said the sensor officer, a Velkhari named Dessa. "Old technology, by the look of the signal design, but it's definitely artificial." "Show me," Rael said. The display flickered, and a shape appeared, sketched out from the signal data. It was a planet, a single blue and green world, orbited by rings of debris that looked like the remains of old space stations, long since abandoned or destroyed. "Could this be it?" Toma asked quietly. "The human homeworld?" Rael did not answer right away. He stared at the image, feeling a strange mix of hope and fear rise in his chest. "Take us closer. Slow approach. I don't want to alarm anyone who might still be there." As the Kelvassa and its escorts moved deeper into the system, more details emerged. The rings around the planet were not just debris. Some of them were massive structures, still intact, still holding position after what must have been centuries. Old shipyards, perhaps, or defense platforms. Some showed signs of ancient damage, scorched hulls and broken sections, as if a terrible battle had once been fought here. "Commander, I'm picking up more signals now," Dessa said, her voice rising with excitement and nervousness. "There are active systems in that debris field. Something out there still has power." Rael leaned forward. "Are we detecting any ships?" Dessa's fingers moved quickly over her console. Then she froze. "Commander, yes, one ship. It's moving." The main display shifted, zooming in on a section of the debris field. A shape emerged from the shadow of one of the old stations, slow at first, almost hesitant. It was unlike any ship Rael had ever seen, sleek but heavily built, with strange angular lines that seemed to serve no clear purpose he could identify, yet somehow gave the impression of raw, coiled strength. It was smaller than the Kelvassa, not much bigger than a scout vessel, but something about its presence made the hair on the back of Rael's neck stand up. "Is it a warship?" Toma asked. "I don't know," Rael said. "It doesn't match any known Drakh design, or any species in our database." The unknown ship continued to approach, slow and steady, its path aimed directly at the 3 Velkhari vessels. Rael's crew tensed. Weapons officers glanced toward their stations, waiting for an order. "Hold fire," Rael said firmly. "No one fires unless I give the order. Dessa, try every communication frequency you can. Let them know we come in peace." Dessa worked quickly, sending out signal after signal across dozens of frequencies, old and new, in every language pattern the Velkhari database contained. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the ship stopped. It hung there in space, a few thousand kilometers away, unmoving. And then, a voice came through the speakers. It was rough, tired, but clearly aware and alert. The words were strange at first, but the ship's translation systems worked quickly, cross-referencing patterns until understanding began to form. "Unknown vessels," the voice said. "You are entering restricted space. State your identity and your purpose. Do it quickly, before I decide you are a threat. Rael felt his hearts pounding in his chest. For Valkyrie had two, one for calm and one for stress, and both were racing now. He stepped closer to the comm station and spoke carefully. This is Commander Rael Ventho of the Valkyrie Alliance. We come in peace. We are searching for a race that our ancient stories call the humans. We need help. Our people are dying. There was a long pause. Rael could hear faint sounds in the background of the transmission, voices speaking quickly to one another, though he could not make out the words. Finally, the voice returned, quieter now, almost surprised. You've found them, or what's left of them. Stand by, Valkyrie ship, I'm bringing you in. The unknown ship turned slowly and began to move, guiding the Kelvassa and its escorts deeper into the debris field, past broken stations and silent ruins, toward something Rael could barely believe he was seeing. A hidden shipyard, tucked inside the shadow of a massive, ancient structure, its lights flickering weakly, but steadily. And within that shipyard, more ships, old ships, damaged ships, but ships nonetheless. The legend was real. The humans were not gone. They were wounded, hidden, and few in number, but they were alive. Rael stood on the bridge of the Kelvassa, staring at the sight before him, and for the first time in 11 years of war, he felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. But even as that hope rose in his chest, a question settled over him like a shadow. If this was truly all that remained of the legendary human race, a handful of old ships hidden in a broken shipyard, could they possibly be enough to save his people from the Drak Empire? Or had he simply traded one desperate gamble for another, chasing a legend that could not live up to the stories told about it? He would find out soon enough. Because deep within that shipyard, something was waking up, and it had been waiting a very long time for a reason to fight again. The hidden shipyard grew larger on the view screen, as the Kelvassa moved deeper into the debris field. Rael Ventho watched in silence, his mind struggling to accept what his eyes were showing him. Broken stations hung in the dark like the bones of some great dead animal, but among them, patches of light glowed steady and strong. Machines still worked here. Someone still lived here. Commander, we are being guided toward a docking structure, Dessa reported. The unknown ship is holding position beside us. Let them guide us, Rael said. Toma, keep the crew calm. No weapons drawn when we arrive. We are guests here, not conquerors. The Kelvassa eased into a massive open bay, built into the side of the largest station. As the ship settled, Rael caught his first real glimpse of the structure's scale. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of anything the Valkyrie had ever built, though clearly ancient and worn. Sections of the outer hull were scorched black, patched over with newer metal that did not quite match the original design. Whoever lived here had been fighting for survival for a very long time. When the docking clamps locked into place, Rael took a small team down to meet whoever waited for them. Toma came with him, along with 2 security officers, though Rael ordered them to keep their weapons lowered. As the airlock hissed open, Rael found himself facing a small group of beings unlike anything he had expected. They were shorter than he imagined from the old stories, standing roughly the same height as Valkyrie, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a single head, much like most sentient species Rael had encountered across his years of service. Their skin was a pale tan color, their eyes a startling variety of shades, brown, blue, green, and their hair, dark and light, grew in short and long styles that seemed to have no single pattern at all. They wore simple gray uniforms, patched and repaired many times over, and every one of them carried themselves with a tired but unmistakable alertness, like soldiers who had never truly been allowed to rest. At the front of the group stood a woman, perhaps in her 5th decade of life by the lines on her face, with steel gray hair pulled back tightly, and sharp brown eyes that studied Rael carefully. She wore a jacket with faded insignia on the shoulder, the fabric worn thin but kept clean. Commander Rael Ventho, she said, her voice carrying the same rough tone he had heard over the comm. I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Cole. Welcome to what's left of the human remnant fleet. Rael bowed his head slightly. A Velkari gesture of respect. Admiral Cole, thank you for allowing us to dock. I did not expect to find you at all, if I am honest. A tired smile crossed Sarah's face. Most people don't. We've spent a long time making sure of that. She studied him a moment longer, then gestured toward a corridor behind her. Come, let's talk somewhere that isn't a docking bay. You said your people are dying. I want to know everything. They walked through corridors lit with a mix of old lighting panels and makeshift repairs, past rooms filled with humans working at machines Rail did not recognize, past children, actual children, small and curious, peeking out from doorways before being gently ushered back by watchful adults. The sight struck Rail harder than he expected. This was not simply a military outpost. It was a home, a hidden, broken, struggling home for a species the rest of the galaxy believed extinct. Sarah led them into a room that seemed to serve as a command center, with old star charts on the walls and a long table in the middle. She sat down heavily, gesturing for Rail to do the same. Now, she said, tell me about this enemy of yours. Rail spent the next hour explaining everything. The Drakh Empire's rise to power, their brutal conquest of dozens of species, their tactics, their fleet sizes, their weapons, the fall of world after world, the enslavement of entire populations, the years of retreat that had brought the Velkari alliance from 12 systems down to 3, and now, likely, down to 2, as Halvex Prime was almost certainly already lost. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with every detail. When Rail finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring at the star charts on the wall. We know the type, she finally said. Empires like that rose before, in the old days. We fought a few of them ourselves. She paused. You said you found us because of an old legend, a children's story you called it. Yes, Rail admitted. I did not believe it was true, until I saw you standing before me. Sarah's mouth twisted into something that was not quite a smile. The legends probably don't tell you the whole truth. Let me guess. Powerful ships, reckless bravery, maybe something about us being wiped out by our own mistakes? Rail blinked, surprised. Some stories say that, yes. It's partly true, Sarah said. A long time ago, humanity was strong. Stronger than we are now. We had colonies across 100 star systems, massive fleets, advanced technology built over centuries of hard lessons. And then we fought a war against an enemy called the Morvek Dominion, a race even worse than what you're describing. We won that war, but it cost us almost everything. Our homeworld was hit during the final battle. Billions died. The survivors scattered, hiding in remote systems like this one, trying to rebuild, trying to survive. That was almost 800 years ago, by our calendar. Rail tried to process the scale of what she was describing. Billions dead. An entire civilization brought to its knees, and yet here they still were, surviving, rebuilding, refusing to disappear entirely. How many of you remain? Rail asked carefully. Sarah's eyes flickered with something painful. In this system, about 40,000. We believe there are other hidden colonies scattered across this part of the galaxy, though we've lost contact with most of them over the centuries. Communication over such distances is difficult when you're trying to stay hidden from anyone who might come looking for what's left of an old enemy's greatest victory. 40,000, Rail repeated quietly. It was a small number for a species that had once ruled 100 star systems. But it was not zero. It was not extinction. It was survival. I won't lie to you, Commander, Sarah said. We don't have the fleet we once had. What you saw in that shipyard is most of what remains of our military strength. A few dozen ships, some newer, most old and patched together from scavenged parts. We are not the legend your people remember. Rail's heart sank a little at those words, but he pressed on. Even a few dozen ships, if they are as capable as the stories suggest, could change the balance of our war. My people need any help you are willing to give. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood and walked to the star charts on the wall, tracing a finger along an unmarked section of space. Commander Ventho, I want to be honest with you about something. My people have spent 800 years hiding. Hiding kept us alive when we had nothing left to fight with, but hiding also means we stopped truly living. We raise children who have never seen the sky of a real homeworld. We patch our ships instead of building new ones because we're afraid that any bright light in the dark might draw the wrong kind of attention. She turned back to face him. When your ship first appeared in our sensor range, my first instinct was to destroy you before you could report our location to anyone else. That's the world hiding has made us. But you spoke of 2 million lives on a planet under attack right now, and something about that struck a chord that hiding could never fully bury. Then you will help us? Rael asked, hope rising in his chest again. I need to speak with my council first, Sarah said. We do not make decisions like this alone, not anymore. But I will tell you this, Commander. My grandmother used to say that humanity was never meant to hide forever. She said that one day, when the right cause came along, we would remember who we used to be. She paused. Maybe your war is that cause. She left the room to gather her council, leaving Rael alone with Toma and the security officers. Toma looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. Commander, 40,000 humans and a few dozen old ships. Is that truly enough to save us? Rael did not have an answer. He thought of Halvex Prime, of the 2 million civilians who might already be dead or enslaved by the time this conversation ended. He thought of Commander Yura, fighting a losing battle back home, with too few ships and too little hope. He thought of the 700 Drak warships that had been closing in on his people when he left. I don't know, Rael admitted quietly. But it is more hope than we had yesterday. Hours passed. Rael and his small team waited in the borrowed command room, given food and drink by quiet, watchful humans who studied them with curiosity but little hostility. Finally, Sarah returned, along with 3 other humans Rael did not recognize, each wearing similar worn uniforms with different insignia. The council has voted, Sarah said, her voice steady but carrying a weight Rael could sense clearly. We will not commit our full fleet. Not yet. We do not know enough about your war, or about this Drak Empire, to risk everything we have left on a single gamble. But, she paused, meeting Rael's eyes directly, I will personally take a small task force to your homeworld, 3 ships, my own command vessel, and 2 escorts. We will see this enemy for ourselves, and we will do what we can to help defend your world while we learn what we are truly dealing with. Rael felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly took his breath away. 3 ships was far from an army, but it was real. It was humans, stepping back into the galaxy after 800 years of hiding, choosing to fight for a species they had never met before. Thank you, Admiral, Rael said. Thank you does not feel like enough, but it is all I have to give. Sarah's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me yet, Commander. You haven't seen what we can do, and more importantly, you haven't seen what it might cost us to show the galaxy that humanity never truly disappeared. She turned toward the door. Prepare your ships. We leave within the hour. Your homeworld is about to get a very unexpected visitor. As Rael returned to the galaxy. Kelvasa. His mind raced with a mixture of hope and worry. 3 human ships against a fleet of 700 Drak warships seemed like an impossible mismatch. And yet, something in Sarah Cole's eyes, something steady and unshakable, made him believe that these 3 ships might matter more than their numbers suggested. He did not yet know how right he was, because within hours, the Drak Empire, an enemy that had conquered a dozen species without ever losing a major battle, was about to meet an opponent, unlike anything in its long, brutal history, and on the bridge of the human command vessel. Resolute. Admiral Sarah Cole stared out at the stars ahead, her jaw set with quiet determination, as she gave the order that would begin humanity's return to the wider galaxy. Set course for Halvex Prime, she said. Let's go remind the galaxy why they used to be afraid of us. The battle over Halvex Prime had not stopped while Rael Ventho was away. Commander Yura had held the line as best she could, but her fleet had shrunk from 112 ships to 68 in only a few days. The Drak pressed harder with every passing hour, their commanders sensing victory close at hand. Halvex Prime's orbital defenses were failing. 2 of the planet's largest cities had already been struck by orbital bombardment, and ground forces were preparing to land. On the bridge of her flagship, Yura watched the tactical display with a grim, tired expression. Status report. Shields at 22% fleet-wide, her tactical officer said. "We've lost 3 more ships in the last hour. The Drakh are pushing a final assault. If we don't receive reinforcements soon, we will not survive the next attack wave." Yura closed her eyes briefly. She had known this moment might come. She had prepared herself for it as best as anyone could. And yet, some small part of her had held on to the hope that Rael's mission might bring back something, anything, that could change their fate. "Continue holding position," she said. "We fight until we cannot fight anymore." It was at that moment that her sensor officer called out, confusion clear in his voice. "Commander, I'm reading new contacts. 4 ships, emerging from the edge of the system. Wait, 3 of them do not match any database signature we have. And the 4th is the Kelvasa." Yura's head snapped up. On screen, the display shifted, showing 4 ships approaching from the outer edge of the battle. The Kelvasa was easy to recognize, its familiar silhouette moving alongside 3 other vessels unlike anything Yura had ever seen. They were sleek, heavily armored, with a design philosophy that seemed to favor raw strength over elegance. The lead ship was larger than the other 2, bristling with weapon emplacements along its hull, moving with a confidence that seemed almost unnatural, given it was flying directly into a battle against 700 enemy warships. "Commander, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead unknown ship," her comm officer said. "Put it through." Sarah Cole's face appeared on the screen, calm and steady, despite the chaos of the battle raging around them. "Velkari Fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Cole of the Human Remnant Fleet. Commander Ventho has explained your situation to us. We're here to help even the odds. Please clear your ships from our attack vectors and let us do our work." Yura stared at the screen, momentarily speechless. The legend was real. Humans were real. And they were here, in the middle of the worst battle of her life, offering help with a calm confidence that seemed almost impossible, given the odds arrayed against them. "Admiral Cole," Yura said finally, "we welcome any assistance you can provide, but please understand, you are facing 700 enemy warships. 3 ships alone cannot." "We know the numbers, Commander," Sarah interrupted gently but firmly. "Just clear the vectors. You'll understand soon enough." Yura gave the order, and her fleet shifted formation, opening a path for the 3 human ships to move deeper into the battle. Every officer on her bridge watched with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope as the human vessels accelerated forward, directly toward the heart of the Drakh formation. On the bridge of the Resolute, Sarah Cole stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the Drakh fleet grow larger on her view screen. Beside her, her tactical officer, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus Webb, studied the enemy formation with narrowed eyes. "Admiral, that's a lot of ships," Marcus said quietly. "It is," Sarah agreed. "But look at their formation, Marcus. Loose, overconfident. They've been winning for so long they've forgotten what it means to face a real threat." She turned to her weapons officer. "Charge the plasma lances. Target their command ships first. We take out their leadership, their formation falls apart." The Drakh fleet, still focused on finishing off the weakened Velkari defense, took notice of the 3 new arrivals only when it was almost too late. A group of Drakh cruisers broke formation to intercept the human ships, confident in their numbers advantage. They had no idea what they were about to face. The Resolute opened fire first, a brilliant lance of energy, more powerful and precise than anything the Drakh had encountered in years of unbroken conquest, tore through the lead Drakh cruiser's shields in a single strike. The cruiser's hull buckled and split apart, debris scattering into the void. Before the surrounding Drakh ships could even process what had happened, the Resolute Siam escorts opened fire as well, each shot finding its mark with terrifying accuracy. On Yura's bridge, her crew watched in stunned silence as 3 ships tore through a squadron of 12 Drakh cruisers in less than 2 minutes. Their weapons output is nearly triple our own capacity," her tactical officer said, disbelief evident in his voice. "And their shields, Commander. I'm reading almost no damage, despite direct hits from Drakh weapons." Yura felt something rise in her chest, that she had not felt in years. Something that might have been hope, if hope had not felt like such a dangerous thing to trust. The Drakh fleet, sensing an unexpected threat, began redirecting more ships toward the human vessels. Dozens of cruisers broke formation, converging on the Resolute and its two escorts. Sarah Cole watched the tactical display calmly, her expression unchanged, despite the growing swarm of enemy ships surrounding her small task force. "Admiral, we're being surrounded," Marcus said. "Should we withdraw to a safer position?" "No," Sarah said simply. "This is exactly where we want them. Full power to forward shields. Weapons officer, target their formation's outer edge and work inward. Let's show them why they used to be afraid of the dark." What followed was a display of tactical skill and raw firepower that would be talked about in Velkhari history for generations to come. The three human ships moved with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic, weaving through incoming fire with precise maneuvers, using their superior weapons to methodically dismantle the Drakh formation from the inside out. Every shot counted. Every maneuver served a purpose. It was clear to everyone watching that these three ships, though small in number, represented centuries of hard-earned combat experience, distilled into something devastatingly effective. The Drakh fleet commander, a massive alien warlord named Krathis Vorn, watched the destruction of his forward squadrons with mounting fury from his flagship, deep within the main formation. "What are these ships?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Send in the second wave. Overwhelm them with numbers." Overwhelm proved to be more difficult than Krathis Vorn expected. Wave after wave of Drakh cruisers converged on the human task force, only to be met with the same devastating precision. The human ship's shields, powered by technology far beyond anything the Drakh had encountered before, absorbed hit after hit with minimal damage, while their weapons cut through Drakh armor as if it were paper. Back on Yura's bridge, the Velkhari fleet had begun to recover, rallying behind the human ship's unexpected assault. Yura gave new orders, coordinating her remaining vessels to support the human task force, striking at weakened points in the Drakh formation that the humans had created. "Commander," her tactical officer said, awe clear in his voice, "the Drakh formation is breaking apart. They're losing coordination." Yura watched the tactical display with growing amazement. In less than an hour, the three human ships had destroyed or crippled over 60 Drakh vessels, breaking the momentum of an assault that had seemed unstoppable only hours before. The Drakh fleet, unaccustomed to facing real resistance, began to show signs of confusion and disorder, their carefully coordinated attack pattern collapsing into chaotic, disorganized skirmishes. On the Resolute, Sarah Cole studied the shifting battle with a calculating eye. "Marcus, status on the enemy flagship? Still holding position at the rear of their formation, Admiral. Heavily escorted." Sarah considered this for a moment. "We won't reach it today, not with just 3 ships. But we've done what we came to do. We've shown them we're not to be taken lightly, and we've bought Commander Yura's fleet the breathing room they desperately needed." She turned to her comm officer. "Signal Commander Yura. Tell her to pull her fleet back to a defensible position. We'll cover the withdrawal." The message was relayed, and Yura's remaining fleet began a careful, coordinated retreat, falling back to a stronger defensive position near Halvex Prime's remaining orbital platforms. The 3 human ships covered their withdrawal expertly, picking off pursuing Drakh vessels with the same lethal precision they had shown throughout the battle. By the time the fighting finally slowed, the Drakh fleet had lost over 90 ships, a staggering loss for a force that had rarely faced serious resistance in over a decade of conquest. Krathis Vorn, furious and humiliated, ordered a full withdrawal to regroup and reassess, unwilling to risk further losses until he understood exactly what kind of enemy he was now facing. As the Drakh fleet retreated into the depths of space, cheers erupted across the Velkhari fleet, a rare moment of celebration after years of near-constant defeat, on the bridge of the Resolute. However, Sarah Cole remained focused and serious, watching the retreating enemy fleet with careful, calculating eyes. "Admiral," Marcus said, "we did it. We drove them back." "For now," Sarah replied quietly. "But that fleet commander isn't going to give up so easily. He'll come back, and next time, he'll come back smarter, With a better understanding of what he's facing, she turned to face her crew. This was just the beginning. If we're truly going to help these people, we need more than 3 ships. We need to convince the Council that this fight is worth everything we have left. Rael Ventho, watching the battle's end from the bridge of the Kelvasa, felt a mixture of overwhelming relief and sobering realization. The legend of the humans had proven true in the most dramatic way possible. 3 ships had turned the tide of a battle that should have been an inevitable defeat. But Sarah's words echoed uncomfortably in his mind. This was only the beginning. The Drac Empire would not simply accept this defeat and walk away. He thought of the 700 ships that had attacked Halvex Prime, and the countless more that surely remained in reserve across the vast Drac Empire. 3 human ships, however powerful, could not hold back an empire forever. They would need more. They would need the rest of what remained of humanity's strength. And somewhere, deep within a hidden shipyard 800 years in the making, that strength was about to be called upon in ways it had not been tested in nearly a millennium. 3 weeks passed after the battle over Halvex Prime, and an uneasy calm settled across the Velkari alliance. The Drac fleet had withdrawn to lick its wounds, but scouts reported growing enemy activity along the border, a sure sign that Krathus Vorn was preparing for a second assault, one that would not underestimate the strange new ships that had humiliated him. Admiral Sarah Cole had remained at Halvex Prime with her 3 ships, helping Yura and Rael reorganize the battered Velkari defense fleet. She had spent long hours in council meetings, sharing what tactical knowledge she could, studying Drac weapon patterns, and preparing reports to send back to her own council, hidden in the shipyard far beyond the reach of Drac scouts. It was on a quiet evening, as Rael reviewed defense reports in the command center aboard the Kelvasa, that Sarah requested an urgent meeting. "Commander Ventho," she said as she entered, her expression unusually serious. "I've just received a response from my council. They've reviewed my reports on the battle, on the Drac Empire, on everything we've learned these past 3 weeks." "And?" Rael asked, though something in her tone already told him this was important. "They've voted to commit the battleships." Rael blinked, unfamiliar with the term. "The battleships?" Sarah allowed herself a small, tired smile. "I mentioned before that what you saw in our shipyard wasn't our full strength. That wasn't quite accurate. What you saw were our active patrol and defense vessels, but deep within that shipyard, sealed away, and mostly dormant for centuries, we have 4 ships that were built during the final years of the HFY War. Ships designed for exactly one purpose, to break the back of an empire that thought itself unstoppable." "How powerful are they?" Rael asked, though he already suspected the answer would be difficult to fully believe. "Each battleship is roughly the size of one of your planet's largest orbital stations," Sarah said. "They carry weapons capable of cracking a moon in half. Their shields can withstand sustained bombardment from an entire enemy fleet. We built them because the Morvek Dominion had thousands of ships, and we needed something that could turn the tide of a battle, even when outnumbered 100 to 1. She paused. "We've kept them dormant for 800 years, Commander. Partly because we no longer had the resources to properly crew and maintain more than a handful of them. Partly because using them again meant announcing to the galaxy that humanity still existed, and still had teeth. And now your council has decided the risk is worth it. They've decided that if we let the Drac Empire continue unchecked, it will eventually become as dangerous as the Morvek ever were. Better to face this threat now, while we still have the strength to shape how the fight unfolds, than to wait until it grows into something we can no longer stop." Sarah's eyes hardened. "We're bringing 4 battleships to Halvex Prime. Full crews, full weapon systems, everything we have left. This is humanity stepping back onto the galactic stage, Commander Ventho, whether the galaxy is ready for it or not." Word spread quickly through the Velkari fleet, and preparations began for what everyone now understood would be the decisive battle of the war. Krathus Vorn's scouts reported the growing Drac buildup along the border, and Velkari intelligence estimated the coming assault would involve well over 1,000 warships, the largest single fleet the Drac Empire had ever assembled for a single engagement. Krathus Vorn did not intend to underestimate his enemy twice. 5 days later, sensors detected the arrival of the human battleships. Rael stood on the observation deck of the Kelvasa. Alongside Yura and dozens of Velkari officers, watching as four impossibly massive shapes emerged from a folding point in space, escorted by a dozen smaller support vessels. Each battleship dwarfed even the largest Velkari cruiser, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements, its surface marked with the scars of battles fought centuries ago and never fully repaired, worn like badges of honor rather than weaknesses. By the ancestors, Toma whispered beside Rael, staring up at the massive vessels with wide eyes. They're beautiful. Rael found himself unable to look away either. There was something about the sheer scale of the ships, something about the weight of history they carried, that made the entire fleet around him seem to hold its breath in collective awe. The lead battleship, named the Constitution, according to the identification signal it broadcast, hailed the Velkari fleet directly, on the bridge of the Kelvasa. The display shifted to show a human officer Rael had not yet met, a tall man with graying hair and sharp, calculating eyes, wearing a uniform more formal than anything Sarah Cole's crew wore. Velkari Fleet, this is Fleet Admiral James Hale, commanding the Battleship Task Force. Admiral Cole has briefed us thoroughly on your situation. We are prepared to engage the Drakh fleet when it arrives. His voice carried an unmistakable weight of authority, tempered with a calm confidence that reminded Rael strongly of Sarah's own demeanor. I understand your people have suffered greatly in this war. That ends today. 3 days later, Krathus Vorn's fleet arrived. It was the single largest gathering of warships Rael had ever witnessed. Over 1,100 Drakh vessels stretching across the edge of the system, their combined presence darkening the tactical display with an overwhelming wall of red. Krathus Vorn, having learned from his previous humiliation, had brought everything he could spare, determined to crush this new threat before it could grow any stronger. On the bridge of the Constitution, Admiral James Hale studied the approaching fleet with calm, measured focus. Well, he said quietly to his tactical officer, they certainly brought enough of them. Orders, Admiral? Standard formation. Battleships form the vanguard. Human escort vessels and Velkari fleet hold position behind us, as a secondary line. He turned to his comm officer. Signal all ships. We advance to meet them. No sense making them come all this way for nothing. The 4 battleships moved forward, their massive engines pushing them toward the overwhelming enemy formation, with a slow, deliberate confidence that seemed almost impossible, given the numbers arrayed against them. Behind them, the combined Velkari and human escort fleet held formation, ready to support when the moment came. Krathus Vorn watched the approaching battleships from his own flagship, a mixture of confusion and grim determination on his face. 4 ships, he said to his tactical officer. They send 4 ships against my entire fleet? Perhaps they are simply that confident, my lord. Or perhaps they are simply foolish. We shall see which, Krathus Vorn growled. All ships, full assault. Concentrate fire on the lead vessel. Break them before they can bring their weapons to bear. The Drakh fleet surged forward, over 1,000 warships converging on the 4 human battleships, in a display of overwhelming force that would have shattered any fleet the Velkari alliance had ever fielded in a single engagement. The battleships opened fire first. What followed defied easy description. Each battleship carried weapon systems capable of unleashing devastation on a scale the Drakh Empire had never encountered in its long, bloody history of conquest. Beams of concentrated energy, thick as small moons, tore through entire formations of Drakh's cruisers in single, continuous sweeps. Massive projectile weapons, firing shells the size of small starships, detonated with enough force to vaporize anything within kilometers of impact. Constitution alone accounted for the destruction of nearly 40 Drakh vessels within the first 10 minutes of engagement. Krathus Vorn watched in mounting horror as wave after wave of his fleet was systematically annihilated, the battleship's shields absorbing the combined fire of hundreds of Drakh warships with barely perceptible degradation. Impossible, he whispered, watching his tactical display fill with the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. This is impossible. Behind the battleships, the Velkari and human escort fleet moved in to finish off crippled Drakh vessels, mopping up the chaos left in the wake of the battleship's devastating assault. Rael, commanding the Kelvasa. From the second line watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and something close to disbelief. "Commander," Toma said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we're winning. We're actually winning." Rael nodded slowly, unable to find words adequate to the moment. 11 years of retreat, of loss, of watching his people's worlds fall one by one to an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. And now, in the span of a single battle, that enemy was being systematically dismantled by 4 ships, built by a species the galaxy had believed extinct for centuries. The battle raged for nearly 3 hours, but the outcome had been effectively decided within the first 30 minutes. Krathus Vorn, watching his fleet reduced from over 1,100 ships to fewer than 300, finally gave the order every Drakh commander dreaded above all others. "Full retreat," he said, his voice hollow with the weight of unprecedented defeat. "All remaining ships, fall back to the border. We cannot win this fight." As the shattered remnants of the Drakh fleet fled the system, cheers erupted across every Velkhari vessel still in the fight, a wave of celebration that spread from ship to ship, faster than any official communication could carry it. 11 years of desperate, losing war had finally, impossibly, turned in their favor. On the bridge of the Constitution, Admiral James Hale watched the retreating Drakh fleet with a calm, satisfied expression, though his eyes carried the weight of a man who understood this victory, however decisive, was only one step in a much longer struggle. "Admiral," his tactical officer said, "orders?" "Let them go," Hale said quietly. "We've made our point today. The Drakh Empire will think twice before it commits to another assault like this one." He turned to look out at the wreckage-filled space around them, the scattered debris of a fleet that had once seemed unstoppable. "Signal Admiral Cole and Commander Ventho. Tell them the battle is won, but the war is far from over." This was never going to end with a single fight. As the human battleships began their slow withdrawal to a defensive position near Halvex Prime, word of the impossible victory began to spread far beyond the Velkhari alliance, carried by traders, scouts, and refugees across the region. A legend once thought dead had returned to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, and the balance of power in the war against the Drakh Empire had shifted in ways no one, not even Sarah Cole or James Hale, could yet fully predict. Somewhere deep within the Drakh Empire's capital, word of the devastating defeat reached the Empire's highest leadership, sparking panic, fury, and a desperate scramble to understand exactly what kind of enemy they had unknowingly provoked back into existence. The legend of the humans, once dismissed as nothing more than a children's story, had returned to the galaxy with terrible, undeniable force, and for the first time in 11 long years, the Velkhari alliance dared to believe that survival, and perhaps even victory, was truly within reach. But Rael Ventho, watching the wreckage of the Drakh fleet drift silently through the void, understood something else as well. The Drakh Empire was vast, spanning dozens of star systems, and commanding resources far beyond what had been committed to this single battle. This victory, as impossible and glorious as it seemed, was only the opening move in a much larger, much longer war still waiting to unfold. In the weeks following the battle at Halvex Prime, the galaxy changed in ways few could have predicted. News of the impossible victory spread across star systems that had never before heard of the Velkhari alliance, carried by traders and travelers who had witnessed, or heard second-hand accounts of, 4 massive human warships shattering a Drakh fleet, 1,100 strong. Some species dismissed the stories as exaggeration. Others, desperate for any sign of hope against the ever-expanding Drakh Empire, began sending envoys to Halvex Prime, hoping to learn if the old legends of humanity were truly real. Admiral Sarah Cole and Fleet Admiral James Hale found themselves facing a challenge unlike any they had prepared for. Humanity had spent 800 years hiding, rebuilding quietly in the shadows, never intending to step back onto the galactic stage in such a dramatic fashion. Now, that choice had been made for them, and there was no going back into hiding, not after what the galaxy had witnessed. Rael Ventho stood beside Sarah Cole on the observation deck of the Kelvasa, watching as a growing number of alien envoy ships gathered in orbit around Halvex Prime, each one hoping for an audience with the humans who had returned from legend to change the course of a war that had seemed unwinnable only weeks before. "It's strange," Rael said quietly. "A month ago, my people believed you were nothing more than a story told to children. Now, half the galaxy is lining up outside your door." Sarah allowed herself a tired laugh. "It is strange. My grandmother used to tell me stories about what humanity used to be before the war with the Morvek Dominion. Explorers, builders. Sometimes reckless fools who charged into danger without thinking things through properly." She shook her head slowly. "I never expected to see that side of us again in my lifetime. Yet here we are." "What will your council decide?" Rael asked. "Will humanity return fully to the wider galaxy, or will this remain a single, isolated intervention?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "I don't know yet, honestly. There are those among my people who believe we should retreat back into hiding once this war is settled, afraid of drawing the attention of something even worse than the Drak Empire. And there are others, myself included, who believe that hiding forever was never truly living, only surviving. Perhaps it's time we found a middle path. Not the sprawling empire we once were, but not a hidden, forgotten people either." Over the following months, the war against the Drak Empire entered a new and dramatically different phase, with the human battleships providing a powerful deterrent and occasional direct support. The Velkari alliance began reclaiming lost territory for the first time in over a decade. Halvex Prime's ground forces, bolstered by human tactical advisors, successfully repelled a Drak invasion attempt 3 months after the Great Space Battle. 2 additional Velkari colonies, previously believed permanently lost, were liberated in coordinated assaults that combined Velkari knowledge of local terrain and enemy patterns with devastating human firepower. Krathus Vorn, humiliated by his catastrophic defeat, found himself increasingly under pressure from the Drak Empire's ruling council, who demanded answers about the mysterious new enemy that had shattered their greatest fleet in a single afternoon. Reports filtered back to Drak Command, describing weapons and technology far beyond anything catalogued in their extensive records of conquered species. Fear, an emotion the Drak Empire had rarely needed to consider during its long history of unbroken victories, began spreading through its command structure like a slow, creeping poison. 6 months after the battle at Halvex Prime, a fragile but real ceasefire was negotiated along the border between Drak and Velkari territory. It was not peace, not truly, but it was the first pause in over a decade of continuous, grinding warfare. The Drak Empire, wary of provoking another confrontation with the mysterious human battleships, pulled back its forces to consolidate and reassess, buying time to study the new threat it now understood it could not simply overpower through numbers alone. During this fragile peace, Rael Ventho found himself invited to visit the hidden human shipyard once more, this time not as a desperate stranger seeking help, but as an honored guest and ally. He stood again in the massive docking bay, watching as human children played in nearby corridors, no longer needing to hide quite so carefully, their laughter echoing through halls that had known silence and fear for far too long. Sarah Cole met him there, her expression lighter than he had seen it since their first meeting months before. "Commander Ventho," she said warmly, "welcome back." "Admiral Cole," Rael replied, offering the same respectful bow he had given during their very first encounter. "The shipyard looks different, brighter somehow." "It feels different," Sarah admitted. "For the first time in generations, my people are beginning to believe that hiding might not be our only option anymore, that we might have a place in this galaxy again, not as legends whispered about in old stories, but as a living, growing people among many others." Rael looked around at the bustling activity surrounding them, humans and, increasingly, Velkari and other Alliance species working side by side, sharing knowledge, technology, and, slowly, trust. "My people will never forget what your battleships did for us at Halvex Prime. Nor will we forget that when we needed help most, you chose to answer, even after 800 years of choosing to remain hidden." Sarah nodded, her expression turning more thoughtful. "There's something I've come to understand these past months, Commander. Legends exist for a reason. They remind people that even in the darkest times something powerful might still be waiting, hidden away, ready to answer when it's truly needed. My people became a legend because we hid ourselves away, letting time and distance turn simple truth into exaggerated myth. But legends can become real again, if given the right reason and the right moment. She gestured toward a nearby window, showing a view of several human ships being prepared for departure, their crews moving with a renewed sense of purpose that had been largely absent during Rael's first visit months before. "We're sending exploration teams out again," Sarah continued. "Not conquest fleets, not armies looking to reclaim old territory, simply explorers, willing to make contact with species who might need help, or who might simply want to know that humanity still exists, still cares about the wider galaxy beyond our own survival." Rael felt a swell of genuine hope as he considered the implications of her words. A galaxy that had grown increasingly dominated by empires like the Drakh, empires built on conquest and fear, might now have a new force to help balance the scales, not through domination, but through alliance and shared strength. "There is still a long war ahead of us," Rael said. "The Drakh Empire will not remain quiet forever. Eventually, they will find a way to counter your battleships, or gather enough strength to overwhelm even that advantage." "Probably true," Sarah agreed. "But we won't be facing that future alone anymore, and neither will you. That's the real difference this battle made, Commander. Not just the ships we destroyed, or the worlds we helped protect, but the fact that isolated peoples across this region of the galaxy now know they have allies willing to stand with them, rather than facing every threat entirely on their own." As the fragile ceasefire held and cautious diplomatic relationships began forming between the Velkhari Alliance, the newly revealed human remnant fleet, and several other species who had reached out following news of the incredible battle, a new alliance slowly began to take shape, one built not on the desperate fear that had defined the Velkhari Alliance's long war against the Drakh, but on genuine cooperation and shared strength between diverse and previously isolated peoples. Admiral James Hale, addressing a joint council of Velkhari and human leadership several months later, summarized the moment perhaps best of all. "For 800 years my people hid because we believed the galaxy held nothing for us but danger and further loss," he said, standing before representatives of a dozen different species who had gathered to discuss the future of what was beginning to be called the New Concord Alliance. "We believed that survival meant staying hidden, staying small, staying silent. But these past months have taught us something we had forgotten during all those centuries of isolation. Survival without purpose is only a slow, quiet kind of defeat. We didn't just help defend Halvex Prime because it was strategically wise, though it was. We helped because it was the right thing to do, and because somewhere along the way, during 8 centuries of hiding, we lost sight of the fact that strength means nothing if it is never used to help those who need it most." Rael Ventho, standing among the gathered representatives, felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope as he listened to Hale's words. His people had entered this war believing themselves alone, facing an unstoppable enemy with dwindling strength and fading hope. They had found, instead, an ancient legend brought back to life, a species that had chosen, after everything they had lost, to step forward once more into a galaxy that desperately needed them. The war against the Drakh Empire was far from finished. Difficult battles, painful losses, and uncertain challenges surely still waited in the years ahead. But for the first time since the war began, Rael Ventho, and countless others across the newly forming alliance, dared to believe that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would not face them alone. The humans, once nothing more than whispered legends and half-forgotten children's stories, had returned to the galaxy, and with their return came not just powerful ships and devastating weapons, but something perhaps even more valuable, the reminder that hope, once thought lost forever, could always find a way to return when it was needed most. As the meeting concluded, and representatives from a dozen different species began the slow, careful work of building a new alliance together, Sarah Cole found herself standing beside Rael Ventho once more, watching the stars through a viewport that, for the first time in 800 years, felt less like a hiding place and more like a window into a future finally worth hoping for. "What happens now?" Rael asked quietly. Sarah smiled, a genuine hopeful smile that carried the weight of centuries finally beginning to lift. "Now, Commander Ventho, we build something new together, and we make sure that the next time someone tells a story about legends returning to save the galaxy, it won't just be about humanity standing alone. It'll be about all of us standing together. And so, the legend of the humans, reborn through fire and battle above a world called Halvex Prime, became not simply the ending of one desperate war, but the beginning of something far greater, an alliance built on hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that even the darkest legends could still find their way back into the light.